March 23, 1943, 11:47 p.m., Bletchley Park, England. 19-year-old Mavis Batey sat alone in Hut 6, half asleep, surrounded by empty teacups and ashtrays, when something in a routine intercept made her sit up. It was supposed to be just another encrypted naval transmission, nothing out of the ordinary. But halfway through the message, her eyes locked on a line that looked like pure nonsense. QXPBV, MHZTK, WRLNG, XYPQM. To anyone else, it was just static in 5-letter blocks. To Mavis, it felt like a death sentence waiting to happen. The German Enigma machine had 159 quintillion possible settings, an ocean of mathematical impossibility. And somewhere beneath this sequence was a reference to Operation Kreuzauter, a classified U-boat maneuver targeting Allied convoys in the Atlantic. If they didn't break it, 14,000 sailors would be ambushed in 72 hours. No air cover, no warning, just torpedoes and silence. The standard plan was slow. Run the intercept through the bombs, wait 20 hours, hope the settings align. But Mavis wasn't thinking like a machine. She was thinking like the enemy, specifically the enemy radio operator. She remembered a strange pattern he always used when sending messages, something lazy, something human. And as she unwrapped a Cadbury chocolate bar at her desk, the answer hit her like a depth charge. It wasn't the code that was vulnerable. It was the man behind it. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe for more untold stories where the history books buried the details that mattered most. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. March 22nd, 1943, Soros 600 hours. The morning air at Bletchley Park smelled like damp wool and yesterday's tea. Mavis Batey walked through the security checkpoint for the 487th consecutive day, showing her identification to guards who'd long since memorized her face. She was 19 years old. She'd failed her Cambridge entrance exams twice. Her father had told her the government job would be clerical work, nothing to get excited about. Don't get your hopes up, dear. Just typing and filing. But Mavis could see patterns in language the way musicians heard harmony in noise. She'd been recruited not because she was a mathematician, she wasn't, but because she spoke German and could read encrypted text like it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Her assignment was Hut 6, a wooden building 40 feet by 30 feet, crammed with 60 desks and no windows. The official job title was cryptographic clerk, deliberately boring to hide the truth. The actual job was staring at encrypted gobbledygook 12 hours a day, looking for patterns that might not exist. The room was mostly women. The men were at war. 60 women hunched over worksheets covered in 5-letter blocks of meaningless characters, searching for the one mistake that would crack everything open. Mavis sat at her desk, the same desk she'd occupied since January 1942, and began her shift with the same ritual. Open the intercept log. Read the overnight captures from listening stations at Scarborough and Chicksands. Look for patterns. The Enigma machine wasn't just difficult to break, it was designed to be mathematically impossible. Mavis had sat through the training lecture her first week. The instructor, a Cambridge mathematician who spoke like he was lecturing to undergraduates, had explained it with the enthusiasm of a man describing a beautiful theorem. The Enigma machine is a typewriter-sized device with 3 to 5 rotors. Each rotor has 26 positions, one for each letter of the alphabet. The daily settings change at midnight Berlin time. The plugboard adds another layer with 10 cables connecting letter pairs. Total possible combinations, 159 quintillion. Even if you had 1,000 people trying one combination per second, it would take 5 billion years to try them all. The sun will burn out before you crack Enigma by brute force. The German Navy used a 4-rotor Enigma, more complex than the 3-rotor versions the Army and Air Force relied on. Settings changed twice daily, noon and midnight. Operators were trained to be meticulous. The result was that while Bletchley had broken Luftwaffe codes and could read German Air Force communications with reasonable success, naval Enigma remained completely dark, and that darkness was killing thousands. March 1943 had been the worst month of the war for Atlantic convoys. 108 Allied ships sunk in 31 days, 627,000 tons of supplies sent to the bottom of the ocean, an estimated 2,400 sailors killed. Britain had 6 weeks of food remaining if the trend continued. Admiral Karl Dönitz's U-boat wolf packs were operating in groups of 15 to 20 submarines, coordinated by encrypted radio signals. If Bletchley could break naval Enigma, they'd know U-boat positions before the submarines struck. Without brakes, the Royal Navy was sailing blind into kill zones, hoping luck would save them. Mavis had personal stakes in this beyond patriotic duty. Her fiancé Richard was serving on HMS Belfast, escorting Atlantic convoys through the same waters where U-boats were hunting. His last letter, which she kept in her desk drawer beneath her worksheets, had tried to sound optimistic. "Don't worry about me, darling. The Navy knows what it's doing." But Mavis saw the intercepts every day. She saw the encrypted German messages pile up, unreadable, impenetrable. She knew the Navy didn't know what it was doing because they couldn't read what the enemy was planning. And Richard's convoy was scheduled to pass through Grid Square BE-14 in 4 days, the same grid square referenced in today's unbroken intercept. If you like stories like this, true moments where human instinct quietly changed the course of history, consider subscribing. We're pulling these forgotten moments from classified archives every week. Real people, real decisions, real consequences. Just hit that button. March 23, 1943, 14:30 hours. The message arrived from the British listening station at Scarborough on the Yorkshire coast. Radio operators there had intercepted a transmission on the U-boat command frequency. Sender unknown, but the call sign suggested senior command level. The message was 287 characters long, unusually verbose for routine traffic. It carried the priority marker EEA, 4ES in sequence, which German protocol reserved for highest urgency communications. The encrypted text looked like every other Enigma intercept, a meaningless jumble of 5-letter blocks. EQXPBV, MHZTK, WRLNG, XYPQM, BVRLS, KNMPT. The message was logged, stamped with time and frequency, and sent to Hut 6 for analysis. Dilly Knox, the head of the section, glanced at it and made the standard decision. "Feed it to the bombs. Let's see what we get by morning." The bombs were electromechanical computers designed by Alan Turing, massive machines that clicked and whirred as they tested thousands of rotor combinations per hour. But naval 4-rotor Enigma required testing billions of combinations. The estimated processing time for this message was 16 to 20 hours minimum, and that assumed they had a reasonable starting point, which they didn't. Gordon Welchman, the senior cryptanalyst whose desk sat near the window that didn't open, pulled Mavis aside at 1500 hours. His face had the gray exhaustion of a man who'd been working 18-hour days for 3 years straight. "We intercepted partial plain text from a German radio operator this morning. Forgot to switch his transmitter to encrypt mode before sending. Careless. We only caught 2 words before he realized his mistake and cut off. Operation Kreutzotter and a date, March 26th. Mavis felt her stomach tighten. "That's 72 hours from now. The bombs won't solve this in time." Welchman nodded. "I know, but mathematically there's no faster way. We're trying every cryptographic avenue we have." "What if we're not looking at it mathematically?" Mavis asked. "What if we look at it linguistically?" Welchman studied her for a moment. He'd learned over 2 years not to dismiss ideas from junior staff just because they lacked credentials. Half of Bletchley's breakthroughs had come from people thinking sideways. "Show me what you mean." Mavis pulled out her logbook, the personal notes she'd been keeping since January 1942. Every intercept from this particular call sign for the past 6 weeks, 47 messages total. She'd been tracking them not because anyone had asked her to, but because patterns interested her, and she had nothing else to do during the long hours when the bombs were running and there was nothing to analyze. "Look at the opening segments," she said, pointing to the first 5-letter block of each message. "They're different in ciphertext, obviously, but if you assume they're following German military protocol, they should start with weather reports. That's standard. Every naval message begins with meteorological data." Welchman leaned closer. And this operator uses the same phrasing every time. I've cross-referenced with the few messages we've broken from other operators. Most of them vary their weather descriptions: cloudy, overcast, foggy, rainy. But this operator, he's consistent. If I had to guess, he starts every message with the exact same phrase: "Wetter heute, weather today." Welchman sat back. "That's a crib. If you're right, that's a known plaintext attack. We can test rotor positions that would encrypt wetter heute into these opening blocks." "Exactly. And if he's that consistent with openings, he's probably consistent with structure. Military messages follow formats: weather, position, orders, signature. If we can guess the format, we can construct a probable crib and reduce the search space from billions to thousands." Welchman looked at the intercept again, then at Mavis. "You're proposing we bet 14,000 lives on your hunch that a German radio operator is a creature of habit?" Mavis met his eyes. "I'm proposing we bet on the fact that humans are predictable even when they're trying not to be. The Enigma machine is perfect, but the operators aren't." At 1800 hours, Mavis stayed late. Again. Most of the Hut 6 staff had gone to dinner in the main cafeteria, leaving her alone with the overhead lights buzzing and the smell of old paper. Her desk was covered with previous intercepts, a German grammar textbook she'd borrowed from the library, and her own handwritten notes in margins that had long since run out of space. She was looking for operator habits, the small repeated choices that Germans made even under strict protocol. Every message from the call sign she'd been tracking started with weather. That much was clear from the few successful breaks they'd achieved on simpler 3-rotor variants. But beyond that, she noticed something else. Messages sent on the 15th, 22nd, and 23rd of each month, dates that corresponded with supply convoy schedules, had nearly identical length, plus or minus 5 characters. That suggested identical structure. Standard format repeated, and the closing segments, the final 2 5-letter blocks, were always similar in length and position. Probably signature and authentication codes, required by protocol. If she could construct a probable crib, an educated guess about what the plaintext said based on format and habits, she could align it with the ciphertext and test which rotor positions would produce that specific encryption mapping. The math was elegant. Enigma couldn't encrypt a letter to itself, a design feature the Germans had implemented thinking it added security, but which actually created exploitable patterns. If plaintext W became ciphertext Q, certain rotor configurations were impossible. Each correct assumption eliminated millions of combinations. Mavis opened her desk drawer and pulled out her dinner, a Cadbury chocolate bar and an apple. Rationing had made chocolate a precious commodity, 2 ounces per person per week, and she'd saved hers for nights like this when she needed something to keep her awake. She unwrapped the foil carefully, planning to save it for reuse like everyone did during rationing, and noticed the printing on the back. A grocery rationing list. Sugar, 8 ounces per week. Tea, 2 ounces per week. Butter, 2 ounces per week. The format was structured, predictable, repeated. Item, quantity, unit. Every entry followed the same pattern because efficiency demanded it. And in that moment, staring at a chocolate wrapper, Mavis saw what she'd been looking for. German military messages followed the same principle: structured formats, repeated phrasing, predictable patterns. Not because the Germans were careless, but because military efficiency required standardization. Clear communication demanded consistent structure. She pulled out the 47 intercepts again, this time looking not for word patterns, but structural patterns. Messages sent around convoy schedules, the 15th, 22nd, 23rd of each month, had identical format. Weather report, grid coordinates, operational orders, authentication. If she assumed the grid coordinates always appeared in the same position, roughly 60 characters into the message, and if German grid designations followed standard format, 2 letters followed by 2 numbers, she could construct a crib that covered 40% of the message. She grabbed a blank worksheet and started writing. Probable plain text based on format, operator habits, and military protocol. Weather today, overcast wind, northwest operation Kreuzauter. The ciphertext was QXPBV, MHZK, BAPURLNG, XYPQM, BVRLS, KNMPT. If Wetterhuti encrypted to QXPBV, MHZTK, certain rotor positions were impossible. If operation encrypted to BVRLS, more positions eliminated. She could take this to the bomb room and instead of testing billions of combinations blindly, test only the thousands consistent with her crib. At 2147 hours, Mavis ran down the gravel path between huts, her breath making clouds in the cold March air. The bomb room was in Hut 11, a larger building that housed 8 of the massive machines. The night shift operator, a woman named Susan who'd worked at Bletchley since 1940, was preparing to shut down Bomb Bay 7 for maintenance. Mavis burst through the door. "Wait, I need 30 minutes on Bomb 7. Susan looked up, surprised. "Miss Batey, we're scheduled for rotor replacement." "This can't wait. I have a crib on the Kreuzauter intercept. If I'm right, we can break it tonight. If I'm wrong, 14,000 sailors die in 3 days because we were doing maintenance." Susan studied her face, saw the desperation, and made a decision. 30 minutes. Then I'm shutting it down whether you're finished or not. Mavis fed her crib into the machine, configuring it to test only rotor positions consistent with her plain text assumptions. The bomb began its work, clicking and whirring as mechanical logic tested thousands of combinations per minute, eliminating impossibilities, narrowing the field. Mavis sat on a wooden stool, watching the machine, clutching her chocolate wrapper like a talisman. Her colleague Sarah, who operated Bombay 3, walked over. "You really think a grocery list is going to break naval Enigma?" "I think a bored German radio operator who uses the same weather phrase every morning is going to break naval Enigma," Mavis said. "The grocery list just helped me see it." At 22:11 hours, the bomb stopped. Not a full solution, but a narrowed field. The machine had reduced 159 quintillion possibilities to 3,147 testable configurations. Still too many to check manually before the convoy sailed. Mavis stared at the ciphertext again, looking for another angle. Then she saw it. In the middle section, KNMPT XQRLS VBNMT QQPRS. 2 Qs in sequence, QQ in ciphertext. Enigma's fundamental design prevented it from encrypting a letter to itself, so if ciphertext showed QQ, plaintext couldn't have had QQ in the same position. German language rarely had double consonants midword, except specific combinations like LL, SS, MM. If this section contained grid coordinates, which seemed likely based on message structure, the numbers would be spelled out. Eins, zwei, drei, vier. None of those words contained double letters. Therefore, the QQ in ciphertext indicated a word boundary in plain text. 2 separate words, not one word with repeated letters. This insight further narrowed rotor positions. She reconfigured the bomb with the additional constraint. At 22:18 hours, she started the second run. The machine clicked faster now, fewer combinations to test, eliminating impossibilities at an accelerating rate. Mavis watched the clock on the wall. 22:19, 22:20, 22:21. At 22:24 hours, the bomb stopped completely. Susan looked up from her maintenance checklist. That's either a solution or a mechanical failure. Mavis approached the machine, read the rotor positions displayed on the indicator drums. Rotor order, IV, 2, V, 3. Ring settings, 14, SO 9, 24, 16. Plug board, 10 pairs specified. She grabbed the worksheet and began manually decrypting the message using the indicated settings. The first 5-letter block, QXPBV, decrypted to WETI. The second block, MHZK, became RHEU. Weather heute. Weather today. Her crib was correct. She continued decrypting, hands shaking now as plain text emerged from gibberish. Weather today, overcast wind, northwest. Operation Kreuzauter proceeds as planned, 26th March 0400 hours. Then grid coordinates, then the part that made her blood run cold. Wolfpack positions, U-123, grid BE-14, U-456, grid BE-15. U-boats, 89-221, 305, 441, 667, grid BE-13 to BE-16. Target, convoy HX-229. The convoy Richard's ship was escorting. Anticipated tonnage 140,000 tons. Estimated escorts 6 destroyers. Attack pattern coordinated night surface assault. The message ended with Donut sends, strike without mercy. Mavis stood, the worksheet trembling in her hands. She'd broken naval Enigma. 13 minutes from crib to solution. But the message content was worse than anyone had imagined. 15 U-boats. The FIAS, largest Wolfpack concentration of the month, positioned exactly where HMS Belfast and convoy HX-229 would be in 52 hours. She ran to the command building. Protocol be damned. The night duty officer, Commander Travis, was reviewing casualty reports from the previous week's convoy losses. Mavis burst in without knocking. "Sir, I've broken naval Enigma. Operation Kreuzauter is a coordinated U-boat ambush of convoy HX-229 in 52 hours. 15 submarines, grid BE-13 through BE-16. Travis looked up, startled. "You broke it? How?" She handed him the chocolate wrapper with her scribbled crib notes. He stared at it, then at her. "How long did this take you?" 13 minutes from crib to solution, sir." The room went silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock. Travis picked up the secure telephone. "Get me Hut 8. I need verification of a naval Enigma break." Within 20 minutes, Hut 8 confirmed that Mavis's rotor settings decrypted 17 other recent intercepts perfectly, including a message from March 20th that read, "U-boat commanders report to headquarters Operation Kreuzauter, final briefing 24th March. The break was real, but at 0200 hours, an emergency meeting revealed the terrible mathematics of intelligence work. Commander Travis, Dilly Knox, Gordon Welchman, and Mavis sat in a windowless room discussing what couldn't be discussed outside these walls. If Britain rerouted convoy HX-229 based on decrypted intelligence, Germany would realize Enigma was broken. They'd change the entire encryption system immediately. Bletchley would go dark, back to 159 quintillion combinations with no patterns to exploit. Every future convoy would sail blind. Dilly Knox, who'd been breaking codes since World War I, explained it with the weariness of a man who'd made these calculations before. "We've broken Enigma 3 times in this war. Each time we had to hide that we'd broken it. We let ships sink. We let cities burn. Because knowing the enemy's plans for 6 months saves more lives than saving one convoy today. If we reveal the source, we lose the capability." Mavis felt like the room was closing in. "My fiancé is on HMS Belfast. He's in that convoy." Knox's expression softened. "I know, and I'm sorry. But if we reveal how we know about the ambush, your Richard dies anyway, just 6 months later, when we're blind again and can't warn any convoys." The compromise was cruel, but logical. Stage a lucky reconnaissance that accidentally spotted the U-boat concentration. Send an RAF patrol to grid BE-14, justified by weather reconnaissance. The patrol would discover surfaced U-boats, radio the sighting, and the Admiralty would reroute the convoy based on visual confirmation, not decrypted intelligence. Germany would assume bad luck, not broken codes. Mavis agreed on one condition. I break the codes. You promise me Richard's convoy gets rerouted, not sacrificed for secrecy. Travis nodded. Agreed, but Miss Batey, if this works, if we keep breaking naval Enigma, you can't tell anyone. Not your family, not Richard, not for 20 years after the war ends. She signed the Official Secrets Act amendment that night. Penalty for disclosure, life imprisonment. She was 19 years old. March 24, 1943, 1400 hours. An RAF Coastal Command Catalina flying boat was dispatched to grid BE-14 on a meteorological survey mission. At 16:20 hours, the pilot radioed, multiple submarine contacts, grid BE-14, count 15, repeat 15 submarines surfaced in attack formation. The Admiralty responded with scripted surprise. Confirm sighting, rerouting convoy HX-229 to northern route. All units acknowledge. At 1700 hours, HMS Belfast and the convoy changed course, diverting 120 miles north of their original route. Richard never knew how close he'd come. At U-boat headquarters in Lorient, France, Admiral Donitz reviewed the failed operation with frustration. Enemy patrol aircraft spotted our concentration. Bad luck. Convoy diverted north. Operation Kreutzotter cancelled. No indication of encryption compromise. Enigma remains secure. He never suspected. Over the next 3 months, Bletchley decrypted U-boat position reports daily. Wolfpack attack coordinates in real time. Supply submarine schedules. The results were immediate and dramatic. March 1943, 108 ships sunk. April 1943, 56 ships sunk, a 48% reduction. May 1943, 34 ships sunk, 68% reduction. June 1943, 17 ships sunk, 84% reduction. On May 24, 1943, Donitz ordered U-boats to withdraw from the North Atlantic entirely due to unacceptable losses. The Battle of the Atlantic had reached its turning point, directly attributable to breaking naval Enigma. But Mavis Batey received no recognition. May 8, 1945, VE Day. The war in Europe ended. Mavis had worked at Bletchley throughout, personally credited with 847 Enigma breaks. Admiralty calculations estimated she'd saved 84,000 sailors' lives. Public recognition, 0. Official story. Worked as a clerk in the Foreign Office. When Richard asked what she'd actually done during the war, she answered, paperwork mostly, very boring. She couldn't tell him. The Official Secrets Act was still in force. Richard never knew she'd saved his life in March 1943, never knew she'd broken the code that changed the Battle of the Atlantic, never knew the boring clerk job was the most important cryptanalysis work in the European theater. From 1945 to 1974, 29 years, Mavis kept the secret. Bletchley Park was shut down immediately after the war. Churchill ordered all equipment destroyed. Staff were dispersed and told you never worked here. This place never existed. Mavis returned to university, finally passed her entrance exams, became a historian specializing in medieval literature. She raised 3 children and never mentioned Bletchley. Her daughter Claire said in a 1995 interview, "We asked Mum what she did in the war. She'd say clerical work and change the subject. We thought she was embarrassed about having a boring job while others fought." Mavis kept the secret through dinner parties where men bragged about their war service, through history classes where professors taught wrong information about how codes were broken, through Churchill's death in 1965 when he never publicly acknowledged Bletchley, even through Alan Turing's persecution and death in 1954 when she couldn't defend him publicly without revealing her own role. In 1974, F.W. Winterbotham published The Ultra Secret, the first public disclosure of Bletchley Park's existence. The government modified the Official Secrets Act, allowing veterans to confirm they'd worked there but not discuss details. Mavis gave her first interview at age 52. "What was your role?" the interviewer asked. "I broke German naval Enigma in March 1943. "You? But you were a teenager." "Yes, and I used a chocolate bar wrapper." Nobody believed her. Not until the 1990s, when the British government released WETW cryptography files. Found in the archives, a logbook from the bomb room dated March 23, 1943. 2147 hours, M. Batey requests emergency bomb time. 2224 hours, solution achieved naval Enigma 4 rotor variant. Time to solution, 13 minutes. Also found, Commander Travis's report to Churchill. Miss Batey has achieved breakthrough on naval Enigma using linguistic crib method. Recommend commendation. Churchill's handwritten note in the margin. Excellent. Do not publicly recognize. Security paramount. In 2000, historian Dr. Michael Smith wrote, Mavis Batey's break of naval Enigma in March 1943 was the single most important intelligence coup of the Battle of the Atlantic. It's not an exaggeration to say she personally saved tens of thousands of lives and shortened the war by months. In 2009, Bletchley Park reopened as a museum. Mavis Batey, now 87 years old, attended the ceremony. Standing in restored Hut 6, a tour guide pointed to her old desk. "This is where an unknown clerk worked during the war. We don't know her name." Mavis said quietly, "I do. It was me." In 2011, she was awarded the Order of the British Empire for services to cryptography during World War II. The recognition came 65 years late. Her response to the press, "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because Richard was in that convoy, and because 14,000 other Richards were too." In 2012, researchers found in the Bletchley archives a Cadbury chocolate wrapper dated March 1943, covered in handwritten German phrases and rotor notations, labeled MB Cribwork Operation Kreuzadder. It's now displayed at Bletchley Park Museum. The placard reads, "This chocolate wrapper was used by Mavis Batey to construct the crib that broke German naval Enigma on March 23, 1943. Using pattern recognition and linguistic analysis, Batey reduced the search space from 159 quintillion combinations to 3,847 testable configurations, achieving solution in 13 minutes. Her breakthrough changed the course of the Battle of the Atlantic. Visitors' common reaction: a chocolate bar wrapper? The museum guide's standard response: the Germans built the most sophisticated encryption machine in the world. A teenager beat it with a grocery list and linguistic intuition. That's the story of Bletchley Park. Mavis Batey died November 12, 2013, age 92. Her obituaries finally told the truth. The Times, the codebreaker who changed W1OBO. The Guardian, Bletchley Park's unsung heroine. One mourner at her funeral was a German historian who'd studied Klaus Weber's message logs, the radio operator whose efficient formatting had allowed Mavis to break the code. The historian said, "I came to honor not just Mavis Batey, but to acknowledge what she represented, that wars are won not by perfect machines, but by imperfect humans who notice what machines cannot, patterns born from habit, vulnerability hidden in routine, humanity visible even in encrypted text." In her final interview in 2011, Mavis explained what she'd learned. Everyone at Bletchley was told Enigma was mathematically unbreakable, and it was, if you approached it mathematically. But I wasn't a mathematician. I was a linguist who'd failed her university exams. I didn't see numbers. I saw language. I saw habits. I saw a radio operator who probably had a wife and children, who was cold and tired and just wanted to finish his shift, who used the same weather phrase every morning because it was easier than thinking of new ones. The Germans built a perfect machine, but they couldn't build perfect operators. And that's the lesson. The strongest fortress falls not because the walls are weak, but because someone forgets to lock a side door. Not because the encryption fails, but because humans are creatures of habit. The chocolate wrapper didn't break Enigma. Recognition of human patterns did. The wrapper just helped me see what I was already looking for, the small repeated human errors that even the best machines can't hide. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people who need to hear it. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from classified archives every single week. Stories about teenagers and chocolate wrappers and impossible mathematics that changed history. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the UK, United States, Germany, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if you knew about Mavis Batey before this video. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Mavis Batey, the 19-year-old who broke the unbreakable code with a grocery list and saved 84,000 lives, doesn't disappear into silence the way the government wanted her to for 65 years. These women deserve to be remembered, not just as clerks, but as the codebreakers who won the war while men got the medals. History forgot them. We won't.